Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of precision, like engineering almost.
Right. A clear yes or no.
Yeah, exactly. You break your arm, the x-ray shows the jagged white line, and the doctor just points and says, there it is, broken.
It's very binary. We like things to be visible, to be easily categorized and, isolated.
Right. But then you step into the world of planetary health, and suddenly that x-ray machine is it's completely broken.
Mm-hmm.
We are flying blind, because today we are looking at Chapter '09, Novel Entities from the Planetary Boundaries Field Guide. And the mission for this deep dive is to understand that this isn't just about traditional pollution.
Not at all.
We're talking about the introduction of human-made substances and, well, modified materials into the Earth system at a speed that is just outpacing our ability to even monitor them, let alone govern them.
Yeah, we are standing squarely on the boundary of what they call unknown unknowns.
Unknown unknowns.
Exactly, because with a boundary like climate change, you have a relatively clear control variable, atmospheric CO2.
Right. You can measure that.
You can measure it. You can track it globally.
Yeah.
But here, we're dealing with millions of distinct substances.
Wow.
Millions.
Wow.
And they're all mixing and interacting in real time across the entire globe.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's look at the life cycle of these substances, because the text has this thought experiment that really shifts how you view everyday objects.
It's a great example.
Yeah. So imagine a company creates a brand new chemical, right? To make a jacket waterproof or to protect a delicate microchip.
Something super useful.
Right. Very useful. It works perfectly. It's mass-produced globally. But eventually that jacket or that microchip, it enters the waste stream.
Which everything does eventually.
Right. So fast forward a few years, and traces of this incredibly useful chemical are suddenly found in deep-sea wildlife because no one understood its environmental behavior when it launched. It's like throwing a newly invented, completely untested gear into a massive, ancient grandfather clock.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Right. Like the clock keeps ticking for a while. It might fit perfectly at first, but eventually that gear might just grind the whole system to a halt.
And the scary part is, it's not just one gear. We are introducing thousands of new gears every single year.
Thousands.
Wow. Thousands. And the danger of a novel entity isn't just its immediate localized toxicity. We have to map out the entire pathway.
Okay, so what does that pathway look like?
Well, it goes from production to use to release and then transport, transformation, exposure, and finally to an Earth system consequence.
That is a long chain of events.
It is. And the significance of that final consequence depends heavily on three main factors.
Okay.
First is persistence. Basically, does it break down quickly or does it remain in the environment for decades?
Right.
Second is mobility. Can it cross ecological and political borders through, wind and ocean currents?
So it doesn't just stay where you dumped it.
Exactly. And third is accumulation. Does it build up in the soil or does it magnify as it moves up the food web?
So a chemical doesn't just cause harm where it's released. It can travel across the globe and slowly build up until, an ecosystem just collapses.
That's the fear, yes.
But if we know this pathway exists, why is it so incredibly difficult for scientists to measure and govern these entities? I mean, we know the steps.
Well, the text outlines 5 distinct hurdles that make this so hard.
Okay.
The first is simply the sheer diversity of materials. As I said, millions of chemicals. Plus plastics, which are themselves complex mixtures of thousands of additives.
Right, they aren't just one thing.
Exactly. The second is incomplete knowledge. New substances hit the market way faster than we can run environmental fate assessments.
We just can't keep up.
We can't. The third hurdle is time, or what they call legacy contamination.
Legacy contamination.
Right, so even if we stopped all emissions today, substances released decades ago are still persisting in the environment.
Wow, it's like the ghost of past industrial booms.
Precisely. The fourth difficulty is scale. A chemical might be safe locally in small doses, but when it's distributed widely at low concentrations globally, it slowly degrades Earth system functions.
Right. The death by 1,000 cuts.
Yes. But the fifth hurdle, this is perhaps the most paralyzing one for regulators, and that is mixtures.
Mixtures. This is where I struggle with how we currently regulate things, honestly.
It's the biggest blind spot.
Because if these chemicals are out there mixing in the wild, how can a regulator, sitting in an office somewhere, possibly set a safe limit for a whole river? Because they test these things one by one in a lab, right?
They do. And that is a massive scientific blind spot. It's known as the cocktail effect.
Yeah, cocktail effect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's look at the mechanism of how this plays out. Imagine chemical A is completely safe on its own,
Okay.
but maybe it slightly thins the skin of an amphibian, like a frog.
Just slightly.
Just slightly. Now, chemical B is also considered safe. Maybe as mild compound that normally can't get past frog skin.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. Separately, they easily pass regulatory tests. But
Hmm.
together in a river, chemical A opens the door for chemical B.
Wow.
And suddenly, a mixture of two safe chemicals becomes lethal.
So testing them individually is practically useless in the real world. I mean, testing them like that is like testing the safety of flour, sugar, and a hot oven separately.
Right.
And assuming that means your cake won't burn, how can we possibly predict those combined effects? A river isn't experiencing just one pesticide.
No, it's experiencing pesticides, pharmaceuticals, heavy metals, plastic additives,
Load of one.
all at once. It fundamentally fails to protect ecosystems because ecosystems experience the whole cocktail.
Right.
And the effects can be additive where they just stack up. They can be synergistic, like the frog skin example, where they actually amplify each other.
Which is terrifying.
Or they can be antagonistic, interacting in completely unpredictable ways. Add in the scale and legacy issues we just discussed, and you see why it's so incredibly difficult to establish a single metric for this boundary.
Okay, so given all those blind spots, all that complexity, how do scientists actually measure if we've crossed this planetary boundary? Are we just guessing?
Well, according to the 2025 Planetary Health Check, this boundary is officially transgressed.
Officially.
Yes. But because it's impossible to measure every chemical in every environment, scientists use a practical precautionary proxy.
Proxy. Okay, what is it?
The control variable they use is the fraction of synthetic chemicals released into the environment without adequate safety testing.
Okay.
And under the precautionary principle, they set that boundary limit at exactly 0%.
Okay, wait. So what does this all mean? Because I'm stuck on this 0% untested rule.
It's a strict rule.
Right, but does tested automatically mean safe? Like, if a chemical company hands over a massive, 500-page dossier proving their new plasticizer is safe for lab rats, doesn't that solve the problem? They tested it. Why wouldn't that count as safe?
What's fascinating here is that local testing for local toxicity just doesn't account for global biogeochemical cycles.
Oh, okay.
A standard lab test doesn't show how a chemical moves through the Earth's water or the air or living organisms over the span of 50 years.
Right, it doesn't account for the grandfather clock.
Exactly.
Word.
The cocktail effect.
Yeah.
So the 0% metric is really an indicator of our societal capacity to evaluate risk, not a direct measure of ecological damage.
Interesting.
And this limitation is actually at the center of a very active scientific debate right now.
Right. This brings up the 2026 perspective paper, the text references, time for a reboot.
Yes. The authors of that paper argue that while the 0% untested rule is a great precautionary warning, a strict zero uncertainty standard is nearly impossible to operationalize as a true risk threshold.
Because we just have to stop making anything new.
Exactly. If we demanded zero uncertainty, we would have to halt almost all technological innovation. So they propose a new framework.
Okay.
They argue the boundary should use complementary indicators, specifically pressure, state, exposure, and impact.
Okay, so how does that actually work in the field? Like, if I'm an environmental scientist, what am I doing differently under this new framework compared to the old one?
Well, instead of just looking at the volume of chemicals leaving a factory,
Which is the pressure.
right, the pressure,
Yeah.
you are now also going downstream. You're testing the river to see what is actually accumulating there.
Okay, and that's the state.
Exactly. Then you are measuring the blood of the fish or the local residents to see who is actually interacting with it. That's exposure.
Wow, okay.
And finally, you are studying whether those combined factors are altering the ecosystem's ability to function.
Yeah.
And that is the impact.
So it moves the boundary from just asking, did the company test it, to actually tracking the entire life cycle of the burden in the real world.
Exactly. It's much more comprehensive.
Okay, to really understand that gap between local safety and an Earth system impact, the text points us to this historical warning. And here's where it gets really interesting. Because it's the ultimate success story, but it also serves as our biggest cautionary tale. Yes, CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons. These were a miracle invention for refrigeration and aerosols, right?
They really were. And in the context of local testing, they appeared completely safe.
Completely safe.
They were stable, they were non-toxic to humans locally, in a kitchen or a factory.
But because they were so stable, they had incredible persistence. They didn't break down at all. They traveled all the way up to the stratosphere.
Right.
And up there, Ultraviolet radiation finally broke them apart, releasing chlorine that literally destroyed the ozone layer.
It's the perfect example.
It proves that a substance can be totally safe for human contact in your living room, but completely disastrous for the planet's operating system.
Yes.
So what is the modern equivalent of the CFC blind spot? What are today's giants?
Well, we see similar concerning traits right now with plastics and PFAS.
Plastics and PFAS.
Right, plastics, as we touched on earlier, are not a single chemical.
Right.
A plastic product is a complex mixture of polymers and often thousands of chemical additives. You've got plasticizers, flame retardants, pigments.
And they don't just go away.
No, as they break down in the environment, they don't disappear. They just fragment into microplastics and nanoplastics.
And based on the mechanics of the cocktail effect we talked about, those microplastics act almost like transport vehicles, right?
They do. They act like little sponges. They absorb other toxins from the water and carry those chemical additives deep into terrestrial freshwater and marine systems.
Wow.
And they often enter the food chain that way.
That is unsettling. And then PFAS.
And then you have PFAS, which are often called forever chemicals.
Right, you hear about those in the news a lot.
You do. They are characterized by carbon-fluorine bonds, which are among the absolute strongest bonds in organic chemistry.
So they don't break down.
They simply do not break down in nature. They are highly persistent, and they are now globally distributed. You find them in soil, in water, in wildlife, and in human blood across the entire planet.
It's wild to think they started as highly specialized technological tools like, a nonstick coating for a frying pan or a firefighting foam. And they just escape their intended use to become a planetary scale contamination issue.
Which brings us to a really crucial point, the human element.
Yeah.
Because this isn't just an abstract scientific concept happening, way up in the atmosphere, down in the deep ocean.
It's happening to us.
It's happening in human communities right now,
Okay.
creating incredibly complex socioeconomic challenges.
Oh.
The source text dives into a real-world case study for this, India.
India. Yeah, looking at the sources, India seems to be almost a microcosm of this entire planetary boundary because you have rapid industrialization, complex waste streams, and agricultural intensification all colliding.
Exactly. You have massive pesticide use, which is necessary for agricultural yield.
Right. People need to eat.
But that has to be constantly balanced against the severe risks to pollinators, soil organisms, and the agricultural workers themselves. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the most complex layer is the informal economy,
Right.
particularly the informal recycling sector.
Because we're talking about workers recovering valuable materials from e-waste and plastics, which on paper, that sounds like a win for circularity, right? We want to recycle those metals. We don't want them in landfills.
It is recovering materials, but the mechanism matters because these informal sectors operate largely outside of formal regulation.
So it's not exactly safe.
No, the recovery is often done through uncontrolled dismantling, acid baths, or literally open burning of electronic wires just to get to the copper inside.
Oh, wow.
This releases heavy metals, dioxins, and toxic additives directly into the local environment, severely impacting the workers' health.
And this is where the environmental justice angle comes in, really, because it's about who pays the price. The text brings up this concept of knowledge justice, which honestly completely shifted how I view consumer products.
It's a powerful concept.
It is, because communities and workers in these informal sectors often have absolutely no idea what substances they are even being exposed to.
There is a profound lack of transparency because of confidential chemical identities and proprietary formulas, protected by manufacturers.
Trade secrets?
Right. The people who are actually processing the waste, the ones physically bearing the toxic burden, are kept entirely in the dark.
That is just, we're basically asking poorer communities or future generations to bear the toxic burden for products they might not have even benefited from.
Exactly.
And it makes me think, if a wealthy country just bans a hazardous chemical locally, but then exports its electronic waste to regions with weaker regulations, they aren't solving the planetary boundary problem at all. They are just shifting the burden.
That's spot on. And a truly just transition towards safer systems has to account for that. You have to improve environmental quality while protecting the livelihoods of those relying on the informal sector.
Right.
Effective governance here requires open data. It requires transparency across the entire supply chain.
Okay, so if we are currently transgressing this boundary, and it connects to everything from biodiversity loss to climate change, because, fluorinated gases also harm the planet,
So you do.
how do we actually back away from the edge without halting human progress? because we can't just ban all chemicals. We need them for medicine, for food production, for green tech like solar panels.
Right. And the goal outlined in the text isn't a blanket ban on all chemicals. The solutions require massive systems transformation. And a major pillar of that is safe circularity. Not just recycling toxic chemicals indefinitely, but actual safe circularity.
Okay.
And that involves extended producer responsibility, or EPR.
Okay, EPR. How does that actually function in practice?
Well, it forces the manufacturer to fundamentally change their business model. Under EPR, the producer is legally and financially responsible for the collection, the recycling, and the safe recovery of their products at the end of their life.
So you can't just sell a toxic battery and wash your hands of it.
Exactly. You are responsible for the entire life cycle.
Yeah.
And to make that work, you also need robust international cooperation.
Right.
The text highlights frameworks like the Stockholm Convention, which actively identifies and phases out persistent organic pollutants globally,
That's crucial.
and the Basel Convention, which controls the transboundary movements of hazardous wastes to prevent exactly the kind of toxic dumping we just discussed.
Okay, but the intervention that really caught my attention in the reading was green chemistry.
Oh, yes.
Because this changes the whole timeline of how we handle pollution. Instead of asking, how do we capture this toxic waste at the end of the pipe? Or how do we clean up this spill? Green chemistry asks, how do we design a molecule from scratch so that it doesn't cause a toxic spill in the first place?
Exactly. It is safer by design. It means engineering chemicals that perform their intended function beautifully, but are specifically designed to degrade into benign substances in the environment.
That is such a shift in thinking.
And the planetary boundary perspective adds a really crucial requirement here, that safer design must be assessed at an Earth system scale, not just a local one.
So it requires a massive societal shift in how we view innovation as a whole. We have to move away from the old model of basically innocent until proven guilty for chemicals.
Precisely. Historically, an innovation system assumed a chemical was safe until proven harmful. A company could release a novel entity into the market and simply wait for independent scientists or regulators to prove it was bad.
Which takes years.
Decades sometimes.
Yeah.
We need to shift to a system that demands producers demonstrate safety before widespread release. It shifts the burden of proof back onto the creators of these entities.
It's about respecting the limits of the grandfather clock before we jam another untested gear inside. We have to map the whole system.
Exactly.
Wow. So to the learner listening today, I want to pass on a piece of homework directly from the source text. Sometime today, look at an everyday object around you, your smartphone, your waterproof jacket, or maybe that non-stick pan in your kitchen.
Great exercise.
Trace its lifespan in your mind. Ask yourself, where does it go after you dispose of it? And what happens when the chemicals inside it mix with everything else in the environment?
Once you start looking at the physical world through that lens of persistence and mobility, it really changes how you view everything you consume.
It really does. And I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to mull over, something that builds strictly on what we've discussed today.
Okay.
The text mentions that the current planetary health check includes human-modified biological entities under this novel entities boundary.
Right.
But some scientists in that 2026 debate, they argue that things like genetically modified organisms actually belong under the biosphere integrity boundary instead.
It's a huge debate.
And it just makes you wonder, if governing synthetic chemicals and plastics that just sit in the environment is this incredibly difficult, requiring global treaties and entirely new fields of green chemistry, how on earth are institutions going to govern engineered biological entities that can actively replicate, interact, and evolve entirely on their own? Talk about unknown unknowns.
It really forces us to ask whether our current regulatory tools are even capable of measuring the things we are inventing today.
It really does. Until next time, keep diving deep.